Right, well, welcome to Toplines and Tales Christmas Party. Our guests on this week have all been previously on the podcast. We have Scott Brown,
Hi, Andy.
Rob Patterson,
Hello, Andy. How you doing?
and the one and only Ken Fletcher.
Bonjour, monsieur.
And hopefully we're all having a dram, and don't worry, I'll edit in some party poppers in a minute to make it sound like a real party. And here we are all in our Christmas jumpers, and I've got these guys on video, and they're tremendous. I have to say mine's in black and white, by the way, but I bought that one because I thought the license was cheaper. So you'll have to be over 50 years old to understand that joke.
Yeah.
Don't give up the day job with the stand-up business. So the trouble is now with my black and white jumper is that I look like one of those spotted Dutch Texel sheep, only not quite so expensive.
I would say, Andy, you're probably more like a spotted dick, but there you go. That's the
So here I am going to give you some top lines and tales, top Christmas tips. So, talking of the Scottish Dutch Texels, anybody fancy one of those spotted Dutch Texels to buy one for the missus this year? They're her price, far too expensive. So why not make your own out of a few cast yows and some old Jacob Tups? They're 3 for a tenner at Darlington Market on a Tuesday. Follow me for more Christmas money saving tips. And okay, some of them might have skers, but that's not really a problem. We know people who can get round the issue of skers. It's not really a problem, although perhaps there goes my application for CEO of the Aberdeen Angus Society going in the bin.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you know what they said today, that, if you don't offend people, you're not a proper comedian in the olden days. Well, I think, Andy, you've managed to offend just about everybody there, including the Jacob breeders who
No.
they don't know whether they want 2 horns or 4.
I think that's Digby Brown lawyers trying to dial in on the call, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, those Dutch aren't the only spotted things, because there's other animals out there known as the speckled park. And you guys haven't seen the speckled park cattle. They are the latest thing, and I want some of those things. And I don't know if you've seen them, but they look like an Irish moiled, only on steroids. I would say this time of year, with the Christmas coming on, we've got speckled sheep and speckled cattle and old speckled hen, of course. But going back to the speckled parks, they're not officially on steroids, obviously, not like their owners. and or the bearded Russian Olympic girls hockey teams. And I've read from their website, so you guys want to have a listen to this, that their website officially says that they are a carcass-orientated yet maternal purebred. Not a composite. It says particularly not a composite. Bred of beef cattle. So they're purebred, not composites. The medium-sized breed originated from 3 British cattle types: the Teeswater Shorthorn, the Aberdeen Angus, and one other unnamed English breed. So seriously, that's what it says. So that's a purebred speckle.
So
that's what's in them.
They claim it's a purebred, but there's all these breeds in it.
Well, there's 2 breeds in it, and one they have no idea what the fucking it is. But
It's beginning to sound like an Aberdeen Angus. The more you think about it.
well, I'm thinking of getting some of these, but I actually want the traditional strain, the ones that go right back to those original cattle there. That's not the recent ones with all this poisonous new blood that's been infiltrated. So I'm going to campaign to see if I can get myself and go with the original ones, going right back to the original breed. If I get some DNA proof that they go all the way back to the Teeswater tea rooms. But probably we might need an advisor. If anybody heard of a guy called Peter Hall, perhaps Rob, he's a friend of yours, I think.
A great guy. He knows a lot about everything, that man. Terrific. I really miss him, actually.
You think we should get him reinstated back into the top lines and tales so we can have some more of his interesting conversations between you and Duncan McLaren and himself?
Absolutely. I see absolutely no harm in that at all. Great entertainment.
I think when you boil it all down, every breed in the country is a composite somewhere along the line, whether it was, say, 200 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. They all had a bit of something in them. Even the likes of your Highland cattle had a wee touch of shorthorn put through them to give them a bit of milk and all that. So, I don't think there's any reason for anybody to get really precious about it. Only way you should get precious about it is when it's done surreptitiously and without the full knowledge of the people that are buying the stock of it. And that's where you're supposed to have your breed society looking after the integrity of the breed and the pedigrees that are in it.
And the CEO that's in charge of it, of course, or not, as some of the cases may be. And you're quite right what you say, Fletch, because there's a lot of breeds out there who allowed some of this imported blood into the breed, and the likes of the shorthorns and such like, and then there's other ones who pretended it wasn't there, and just not quite sure where the speckle fits into that with its other unnamed English breed. Maybe we can just name it ourselves as we go along. Perhaps we should call it the speckled insert name here breed. Or we just actually get an Irish moiled and put it on steroids. That's another option. If you can get steroids on prescription these days, it's far cheaper than going to Saskatchewan, where these things come from, apparently. If you can spell Saskatchewan, don't send them a Christmas card, right? Anyway, top tips from Andy Fraser there. Let's move on. You guys got anything else to say about the cattle industry that's going on at the moment?
I think one of at the end game, I think we're all been led up the garden path a wee bit by some of the shenanigans of some of the supermarkets that are beginning to sell Irish beef again, New Zealand lamb. It used to be that they said it was for commercial reasons, but there can't be any commercial reason for a supermarket to sell New Zealand lamb at the moment, because it's as dear in New Zealand as it is here. So the big loss is in the transport of the thing, and all these supermarkets signed up to the COP26 thing and said they were going to reduce waste and reduce food miles, and then they bring in lamb from New Zealand that's probably costing them more over there than it is here. This doesn't stack up, other than being a spoiler for the UK sheep trade, and they're doing the same with the beef and by importing Irish beef. So we've got to think about the end game, because there's no pedigree world without an end game in a commercial sense. So I think we've been hauled over the coals at the moment by the supermarkets, and we need to fight back a wee bit.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ken what he's saying about the lamb, because lamb at best is a 10-month of the year eating experience in the UK. So, there's nothing wrong with New Zealand lamb coming in, as hideous as it is to think that Easter we've got New Zealand lamb on the shelves or in people's houses celebrating Easter. But, it's there to prop up the eating quality of lamb and keep people eating lamb for the other 10 months of the year. So I don't understand why they've got lamb in supermarkets at this thing. And just the same way as Ken said, I don't understand from a climate change or from a carbon footprint point of view, it's madness. I don't understand that at all.
Are people being told that it's there? That's the thing. Are people understanding that it's there? And as you said, when it's no cheaper, then I don't really see why they'd even be buying it.
Well, the problem is, I was in a store at the weekend, and there's a big saltire with a farmer stand at front of it telling everybody how good the Scotch beef is, and you could not find Scotch beef on the supermarket shelves. There was some British beef, but not Scotch labelled, and it was all mixed in with Irish beef. There was no delineation between the two. And I believe the same was happening in the lamb. They were all mixed up. Tesco, for instance, did a half-price lamb if you were a club card owner, which meant that you were paying 15 quid for a decent leg of lamb. But if you picked one randomly off the shelf, the chances are it would be New Zealand.
In France, it's certainly. I saw some today. It was 20 quid a leg, and that used to be about 8 when we used to come in here. Certain times when the New Zealand lamb came in, the boys having the barbecues in the summer, you go in there, buy the frozen lamb, you buy 10 legs and stick them in your freezer, and then you had a barbecue in the summer. You could just chuck it on. I sell lamb at £10 a kilo at the farm gate, butchered, and for a whole lamb, and they're selling theirs now at $13.95 per kilo for a leg through the supermarket. So they have priced themselves out of it. Be interested to see how the French farmers pick up on that, because France generally look after their own.
That's the problem in the UK. There's a lack of education to the general public. Your housewife goes into the supermarket and she'll buy the cheapest piece of beef or the cheapest piece of lamb she can get her hands on, because that's what the housewife that's buying her beef out of the supermarket or her lamb out from the supermarket does. Your people are more educated and understand about food miles and carbon footprints and origin and everything like that. Will go to your local butcher, and that's where they buy their meat. Your housewife that's going to buy meat out of a supermarket has never been educated about quality of beef, origin, anything like that. Whereas in France, they're educated from primary school about eating, about meat, about everything to do with farming. I mean, the parish shows a great example of it, where they've got literally thousands of children year on year going through the gates, being educated from field to plate, and they see the whole process. There's nothing hidden from them, and they understand where their food's coming from. Kids these days think that their food comes from Tesco's, and that's the problem. That's the big problem I've got in the UK.
But I get what you're saying, and it has changed in France. We do get a lot more processed stuff now. We're getting a lot more of vegetables coming in out of season, coming in from Almeria down the road in Spain, obviously, and pre-packed plastic stuff, which we never used to see. And that is changing with, I suppose, France modernising, maybe catching up with the rest of the world. It's still 30 years behind the UK in most instances. But going back to the British side of it, the British housewife has generally bought with the pocket. Despite what they've been told and what have you, when it gets down to standing in, we're all the same, maybe it gets down to standing in front of something, they go, that's the cheapest one, I'll have that one. But all of a sudden, if that's the cheapest one and I'll have that one and it's not New Zealand anymore, Fletcher's got a good point, but what the hell's it doing there?
I think we've all got to get over the fact that everybody likes the idea of having a green economy and being good for the environment and all the rest of it, but there is a price to pay. And I think, the general public, if they were asked a question, would you like a better environment? Of course, they're going to say yes. And then if you ask them, well, are you going to pay a wee bit extra money to help promote and produce a good environment for your children? I think the vast majority of them say no. Or they won't say no, they'll say yes, but they'll vote with their feet and say no.
Mm-hmm. Interested to what you said earlier on, Fletch, about the Irish beef, and it is a bone of contention now with us being in Brexit and being at Ireland no longer being our European allies, and Irish beef over the years has had its stigma with, I'm going to get controversial with its dust-in and hormones and various things that happened in Ireland that didn't happen in the UK, and the beef being shipped over and the beef industry being controlled by the Goodman brothers and all those sort of things that went on through the 80s. But of lately, we'd like to think we were all singing off the same page. But now with us no longer being in Europe, then are they still conforming to the health standards that you think the British purveyor demands?
Well, I mean, there's always been a kind of difference between Irish beef and Scotch beef in that you never really know what you were getting in the first place. In some instances, there certainly was that case in the past. I'm quite sure that they've upped their standards a wee bit now, but you cannot get away from the fact that beef produced in Scotland has certain assurances that come with it. There are no get-out clauses along the way to it being produced and coming out the other end of an abattoir. So, of course, we should be marketing the fact that this is beef that comes with certain assurances, and we should treat every import with some kind of suspicion that it's not, because if we don't, then we're not being able to say that we are the best in the world.
Goes back a little bit to price, though, doesn't it? If it's coming in at the same price and no cheaper, then it shouldn't probably won't be coming in. I mean, the only reason, or maybe not the only reason, but one of the reasons the things are coming in cheaper is because they're produced in maybe a more economical way than we produce the beef ourselves, and that probably applies more to the southern hemisphere beef coming in than perhaps from Ireland. There's no real reason why Irish could produce the beef any cheaper than we can.
But yeah, then you have the argument that because we're producing it to a certain standard, we're adhering to a lot of management principles that nobody else is. There's dead stock rules, there's, getting rid of plastic. We all have to adhere to the rules of this country, but I'm not so sure that these are so rigidly adhered to in other countries that we're importing beef from, which is the whole argument about you have to pay for the green credentials or what we're doing is worth nothing. We might as well go back to a dog and a stick and producing it the same way they do.
With medicines and stuff, I mean, in Southern Ireland, all over Europe, the Southern Hemisphere, they're all using products that we can and are banned from using. Now, they're legally allowed to use them, and they're putting these products into their beef and their lamb and then sending them in here. And we can't use those products to produce our products. So I just don't see how that should be allowed. I mean, if they can do it, why can't we? Or vice versa, if we can't do it, then they shouldn't be able to do it if they want to import into our country.
We're in danger of having a gripe about this between ourselves there, Scott. What's your input? Is there something we can do about this? Do we just have to moan about it, or where can we all make a difference to ensure that what we're doing is actually the right way, and these guys get pushed back?
Well, I think looking from the outside in, Andy, basically, since we've been having this discussion, I know the demographics of shoppers and major retailers is 35% of people who walk in the door don't care about origin, where it's come from, how it's been reared. It's all to do with price. Mm-hmm. And the other 65%, which is, for me, I think is quite a big percentage, actually do care about origin, how it's been reared, how it's been bred, where it comes from, which farm it is. And all I can think of is the supermarkets and major retailers have got economists who can obviously forward forecast. They're probably looking at, there's probably going to be a bit of carnage on the back of no furlough this time. We've not really seen that massive effect of people being offloaded from their jobs onto the unemployed. And I would reckon we could probably see that figure change from 35% of people going through a supermarket to maybe up to about 40, 45. And if that's what's going to happen, supermarkets are probably just being a bit more cautious and taking in some cheaper meat at the moment. It is a bit double standard, though, as Ken just sort of said. We've got to jump through hoops at this end to get anything on the shelves at all. Basically, we're basically shouldering all the responsibility and liability in anything that people eat in Scotland, and taking that responsibility away from the major retailer. But it suits one week and it doesn't the next when they can buy cheaper meat somewhere else.
The problem I have from a Toplines and Tales podcast that we have here, we have a captive audience who we're all singing the same page here, and if anybody else listened to this, I think we're all just whinging about it. Whereas, there is or should be at some stage something that could be done to highlight these. Whether it's, I don't know where the body comes in, and again, this is probably tail wagging the dog here, but where the body comes in, we get enough of us to get together actually to get on the television and say, never mind your advert for Tesco's, here's an advert for beef or for how it is, and the reality of what you're eating is. The climate change thing has fallen off the radar a little bit at the moment with COVID coming back in again, but it'll come back, and every time that comes back in there needs to be enough lobby to counter these people, and the problem is there's not enough power in the media.
You've got to be very careful there, Andy, though. That would have to be a very clever campaign, because that could backfire on you quite amazingly if you start pushing pictures of meat getting produced in a unsavoury manner. It just puts people off altogether, because the vegans are jumping on anything they can get their hands on. It's quite difficult. I think some of it will sort itself out with regards to the lamb. The Middle East and Asia are going to take just about all the lamb from Australia and New Zealand, more or less own most of the Australian major processors and slaughterhouses now, China. So I think that's going to more or less come out of the equation, really. The beef side of things could be different with South America and such like, but how you tackle it, I don't know. I really don't.
We have a levy body, QMS, obviously there to present that and promote that. Yeah, well, you've got AHDB in England and Wales, QMS in Scotland. I mean, they're there to promote rather than push back, because they said if you speak to anybody in QMS, they'll tell you that the budget they have to work with is tiny, absolutely tiny, to take on bodies like, when veganism was really being anti-meat about a couple. Well, I'm not saying it's not now, but when they were really being vocal about a year ago or 18 months ago on the anti-meat campaign, the budget that QMS are working with to push back against that is tiny, absolutely tiny. So, with whatever we do on the national press or in social media or on the telly in terms of adverts and trying to get people on board, Rab's right, we really have to box cleverly to try and get the maximum bang for our buck, because and watch what we're doing, because it would be so easy to turn people off eating meat by promoting or making people aware of the
unethical things that are happening abroad.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you're absolutely right there about promoting the thing. It's actually a pittance that we pay, our farmers pay into the system to promote their own product, and they're always thinking it's left up to somebody else. And you mentioned QMS there, and you have to feel a wee bit for QMS, even though some of you might think they've got failings or whatever. They're up against a rock and a hard place with this argument, especially with the vegan thing. If you think about it, a tin of beans has a huge promotion behind it that gives it a cachet that makes it worth more than twice what the supermarket brand is. And that's the way we should be thinking. We should be thinking, put a bit more money into it, get the professional help that you need to promote this thing, and you will turn it around. It will come, but it's going to need money. And you can't do it for two bob, or as Jim Walker said to me, two fags in a balloon. You can't do that. It needs a bit of serious money behind it.
And you're saying if enough money was put behind that, I think I'm reading between the lines that people would pay a premium when they saw the word Scotch beef versus meat from other parts of the world or unethical parts of the world. And I suppose you have to distinguish between Scotch beef and then British beef and then Irish beef and then other rubbish from or varying scales down the way. Or was he?
Yeah, absolutely. It needs it. It needs the money. It's all about the money. You can't sell anything these days without giving it a bit of promotion. And to be fair, you can punch above your weight with a very small budget, but you need to know what you're doing, and you need to know that you have the backing of the people that are with you. And I think that's maybe where QMS falls down a wee bit. That I know it has its detractors and all the rest of it, but get the right people in place, give it a bit of money, and you'd be amazed at what it could do.
And should the Scottish government be putting that money in? Should Nippy be putting that money in, Fletch?
Why not? Why not? I mean, agriculture is a huge part of the GDP in Scotland. Why not promote it? They keep telling us that they're going to push for £30 billion worth of food exports by 2030. And then they put every obstacle in the way of doing it.
Yeah.
Why don't they live up to their dream and put a bit of money behind it and make sure that it happens?
Okay.
Dead easy.
I don't know. I mean, I think whatever they decide to do, however they decide to promote it, they need to get on with it and get going quickly, because in the last 2 years we've lost 1,000 suckler cows a month in Scotland alone. And I think we're probably a sub 400,000 suckler cows in Scotland now. And I think we're pretty close to the critical mass that we're probably there now. I think if we don't stop the rot, we're going to just see the infrastructure just starting to cave in. And when you haven't got that backlog, or when you haven't got that sort of backup of volume to supply a market, if it does take off, then you just get left high and dry. And our industry is really badly needed, and the beef industry in particular really needs a lift at the moment to try and keep cows on the hills.
So, Andy, what's happening in France? Do they actively promote beef in France, or what?
No, in the area that I'm in, no, because it's all arable and it's. Hey, we used to grow tobacco in this area, and I think they still smoke it. Some of the old farmers, they don't move very fast anyway. And there's a few blondie cows down around here, and I'm not a big fan of the blondes. Not those type of blondes, the long-legged bastards that they are.
Well, I've always been a fan of a long-legged blonde myself, but it's up to you.
Sure, but the farmers will look after the farmers here, but before with the beef we have down here with the blonde cattle, they don't kill them until they're 3 years old, because they like them to have a calf first. They think the beef tastes better if heifers had a calf before they eat it. So you got 3-year-old beef, and then the blonde Aquitaines are all as mad as a fucking butcher's axe. So they take them into the abattoir. They take him into the abattoir, and these things are jumping up all the walls and galloping about the place. So they're all stressed to hell, and so eventually they get that thing, and they've got no fat on them, so they can't hang them. So they hang them for about 30 minutes. If they hang them any longer than that, they all go black. So you end up with unhung beef that's been killed.
They'll be purple as hell.
And then, but the farmers here, the one thing you'll see if you go to the old farm, these little grinders by the door, and they'll take the false teeth out and they'll sharpen those on a Sunday before they go for the Sunday lunch, and literally sharpen the false teeth on both sides, and then they get down and sit and have their dinner. And the one thing people say, the great thing about a Sunday lunch in France is it's dead silent, because the old farmer, you never normally shut him up. He sits there and he chews every mouthful for about 17 minutes on average, and takes about 3.5 hours to eat his Sunday lunch, because he's having a piece of beef. So you tend to know when the blonde Aquitaine beef is on the table. That's a party political broadcast on behalf of the Blonde Aquitaine Cattle Society. I'm not volunteering for CEO, if you don't mind. Thank you.
That's the next.
I have to point out, though, I mean, in the past, and I know it was a long time ago, I can remember Blonde Aquitaines winning the Royal Ulster Show just about every second or third year or so. And one of them was an animal bred in Scotland by the late Jock McGregor. Gregor's Janet, she was called. I think she won the Royal Ulster twice, and I think she might have won the Interbreed as well. And a guy called Adrian, he won with, I think it was a kind of imported cow, but he won the Interbreed 2 years in the trot. And there was nothing better than a good Blonde Aquitaine. The problem was there wasn't that many of them.
Too many of them where I am, but if I just Fletch is that I would, and strange enough it ties Rob into this as well, because it's the guy that flushes your cattle put me a beast in my direction. Sandbrook Bunyip, bred by Joe Whelan in Southern Ireland. And she was brought over to the UK, so I ran her to the show circuit, and she won a couple of shows. I ended up at the Three Counties, and Jock McGregor was judging, and she'd got a head. I would say, well, I've got a 6-foot door in front of me, and I mean, the rest of her would go through the door, but her head probably wouldn't. It was that long, so she had this head about 4 foot long. Why the long face joke came in, and Jock McGregor, and he took a look at her, and he's coming out the door, and he's going to just get that thing away from him, and he refused. He put her last, I think, in the class, and I think old Joe Whelan was there as well, and they're just having a row about this thing, and he said she's the ugliest headed bastard ever. So there was a little bit of animosity, but yes, you're right. Jock was some man in that job, and of course Jock being one of the very first men bringing Texels into the UK too.
Yeah, I remember speaking to Jock about the blondes actually years ago, and Jock was of the opinion if the same guys that got into Limmies got into blondes when they first came in, the blondes could have been the most dominant of the two.
And where I sit, the blondes are from here south, and the Limmies are from here north. I'm kind of on the cusp of them, and I would say Limmies are always going to win that argument. But then it depends what you want out of a beast. So when it goes south from here, the weather gets hotter and warmer, and the blondes will live more in that warmer climate, maybe, which probably isn't Scotland. So. But you look at the Quicks, you look at old Bill Quick, the quickest man ever to sell you something. Those guys went into blondes and limousines, and they did well in both breeds, but limous is where they ended up. So maybe that's not quite the truth. Right, so continuing in our top lines and tales, top Christmas tips, here's another money saver. Instead of giving all your money to Raymond Irvin, you could make your very own Valais Black-Nose sheep. All you need to do is to get an old goat and an Afghan coat. And there's plenty of those for sale, secondhand on the Taliban website. Anyway, carry on. Wait for Christmas, Fletch. You cooking?
I'm cooking. I'm eating a turkey. Uh-huh. But I'm not going to pay 140 quid for a Norfolk Black. Oh. I've got a 16.99 special out of Aldi. and I'll tell you why. Because I can't tell the difference. Maybe I've got COVID and I can't taste or smell anything, but when I eat a turkey, it always tastes the epping same. Why would you spend £140 on something you can get for $16.99 out of Aldi? And you know that it comes from Scotland.
You sure it doesn't come from Turkey there, Fletch? You sure you read the label? You got your glasses on?
I think if it came from Turkey, it was flying like hell. And it's frozen, and I will properly defrost it. I will properly cook it. And the most important thing to do with turkey on Christmas Day is to leave it to rest. Uh-huh. So therefore, when you're leaving it to rest, it gives you time to have a drink.
Sure. Which
I shall manage with some aplomb.
So you're cooking yours, what, Tuesday, so it's rested till Friday and had plenty of drink?
Started cooking it in January.
I think Aldi's are missing out on a strap line there. They could be saying, had COVID, lost your sense of smell, lost your sense of taste. Buy one of our $15.99 turkeys. You won't know the smell or the taste. It won't matter.
Taste of fuck all, and it came from Turkey.
Just call it the COVID turkey.
The COVID turkey.
I feel a lawsuit coming on.
I've got 2 vegetarians for Christmas, and we're having a leg of salmon. It's stuffed with various things, and apparently in a Wellington. So it could all be different. Could all be interesting. I've never eaten vegetarian before. I don't know what they taste like.
How do you cook them, these vegetarians?
Well,
I was going to wonder what they tasted like.
Is it on a spit?
I think they're a bit like blondes, Fletch. You can't leave them on the spit too long; they dry out.
So, Rob, you'll be doing Santa this year. I see you got the beard going on already there. It's not grey enough yet, but you'll be definitely coming down the chimney there and getting your mince pies and all the shit. Especially in the new house. Have you got the chimney wide enough for you, Rob? You got a big one in there? Get extension in it.
I'll get down. I'll get that chimney. No bother, Andy. No bother at all. Just get myself greased up and then down you go. It's not a problem. The beard's coming off. I'm under orders to sharpen up for Christmas, so it'll be a visit down to the local Turks.
See that? Did you like the way he did that? Look, this is like a DJ link, like he's talking about the turkey, and then we get the Turkish barber. It's all be fitting in nicely.
The Turkish barber is quite a lad. He'd opened this new shop in Dunblane, and he's in Pollock in Glasgow, which is one of the more affluent areas, isn't it, Fletch?
Effluent.
Him and his family stay here. It turns out he's got 5 barber shops: one in Glasgow, one in Dunblane, one in Newcastle, one in Birmingham, and one in Manchester.
That's the poor man's London, Paris, New York.
Absolutely. But he does a cracking shave, and he's very interested in farming, actually.
If he's any good with his shears, you can fetch him round to dress that up for me for the Highland show then. Cheers.
There's more to it. He'll cut his throat and fuck off down the road. You better leave that out.
Kebab while you wait. I suppose it's a multi-purpose thing because they can barber all day and then kebab all night. It's like a 24-hour business, really. True enough.
The last time I was in a Turkish barber only once, and I was sitting there waiting for some Egypt who was getting his beard trimmed, and it looked as if it was very methodical, and they had the whole thing over the top of his head and everything. And who would popped out from under it but Ali Jackson? He goes in there all the time, and then he went across the road and had 14 rolls of bacon out of the baker's shop.
You'd have thought Ali would have trimmed his own beard. A man like that, you thought he could manage a bit of a job in the mirror there, couldn't you?
He maybe got one of those vouchers for 30% off a back sack and crack.
We all know it's Hannah Sloan that's the stocksman there anyway. So.
Yeah, don't worry, this is all going out live. You're fine. That's brilliant.
One of the most influential people in my time in breeding Suffolk sheep was a guy called Jamesy Dunn, JP Dunn from Coombsley. He was like the Ricky Fulton of the Suffolk world. He was extremely amusing. And I remember him the year that a certain Suffolk ram that was champion one of the last Edinburgh Suffolk sales. He was one of the most phenomenally appealing rams from the front. He had a fantastic outlook, but from the back, he just needed one back leg because his back legs were that close together. And I remember standing in the pen of lambs, and I looked up, and here's Jamesy Dunn standing into the pen, and he goes, "Well, what are you thinking?" And I said, "Well, you'll not do me." He goes, "Me neither." He says, "He's just a disaster." But he says, "I'll tell you something better than that." He says, "Somebody's going to actually have to stay here the night with that beast." He says, "With a fire extinguisher." And I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Well, if that bugger's back legs start rubbing together," he says, "this place will catch fire."
The Royal Show, bloody hell. I remember it would be 1998, I think. It was the European Championships were getting played at the time. And myself and Stuart Bett had a skinful after the showing, and we decided that we were going to have all the flags off the veranda of the Charlie Cattle Society building, because there's quite a lot of the European teams that were playing that evening. The flags were up there. So there was games going on. Anyway, we went up and we got it was either Denmark or it was Norway. Anyway, we went and nicked that flag. England were playing that night, and it was getting shown in the Texel Society tent. So in we went, the two brave of us in there about when the game was on. In we ran to the Texel Society tent, who had a big screen up. And who was the first person we met in there but David Benson, the Charlie Cattle chief executive, who more or less grabbed us by the collars and says, "Lads, you're climbing back up that veranda tonight and putting that bugger back where you got it." To be fair to him, he let us stay and watch the football and then marched us back and made us climb up and put it back. But we used to get up to some hijinks at the Royal and the Highland and things like that. Hopefully there's more to come. But
as you know, the Royal Show used to be the event of the year. It managed to eclipse the the Highland Show by a considerable margin, in my opinion. It was where farmers went to do business. They sold a lot of pups to people in the south with lots of money. It was great. It was fantastic for Scottish breeders. One of the guys to take advantage of that was Gavin Shanks. When Big Gavin first started importing Beltex from Holland, he always used to make sure that they brought in about 20 gallons of Dutch port in gallon bottles. This is a thing to behold. These things were a thing of beauty, but they had to be drunk quickly before they went off. Anyway, he used to host a wee party at the back of the Royal Show, and I think the modus operandi was get as much down your neck as you possibly could. I think probably most of you have been there.
Absolutely.
So Big Gavin in those days took quite a bit of a sup himself, and so he grabbed me by the shirt, the top of my shirt, and he said, "That's a nice shirt. I'll have that," and went woof. I took the whole thing off. Between the strength of a guy who was 24 stone and the weight of a guy who was 20 stone, the shirt and I parted company quite healthily. And so poor Alice, she gave me a bit of sympathy and said, she gave me one of Gavin's shirts, which looked like I was in a big top. So the
Looks
next
like you were
day,
in your 90.
the next day at the show, a person I'd never met before came up and gave me a bit of my shirt and said, "Big Gavin asked me to give you a bit of this shirt. There you go." And this happened over the next 3 days. So a year later, I was invited to go to Champagny, the well-known restaurant in Linlithgow, where Gavin's best man ran the ship. It was all to do with the fact that Gavin sold them. This is Gavin for you. He sold them a pair of cockatoos and then extracted a heap of money off them every year when the guy went to South Africa on holiday to look after the damn things. So the price of this was a table for 10 in Champagny, all for looking after these two cockatoos. They were pink cockatoos. They were just not ordinary cockatoos. These were champion cockatoos. So we went in there a year after fully a year, maybe 18 months actually after this event. And we all had a starter, whatever. And the waiter came round to me and says, "You're having a special course, intermediate before the main course." I said, "Oh, fantastic." He said, "But you'll need a bib for this." So I got a kind of thing that looked like a baby's bib on and a big towel around it and all that. And they brought out the big silver platter about this size, huge. And it lay down in front of me, and Gavin pulled the top off it, and there was the collar to my shirt. That was the kind of big twat he was. He kept these things going forever and ever and ever. And even later in the day, he would produce a little bit of my shirt and hand it to me. He must have spent hours cutting this thing up into 1-inch squares. And if you know the size of me, you'll know how many 1-inch squares there was.
An amazing man. Maybe one day we should just pull all those stories together and just have a bit of crack about the big man, because he was something else. And
it was just Big Shanks's party. If I remember correctly, it was the same party because I was a bit late there that night, and when I got there, Fletch was running about naked. But what really caught my eye that night was Fletch's right-hand man, McSkimmon, on the top of the Ivor Williams, with his shirt off, swinging it above his head. This was after a good half gallon of Gavin's famous port. How he got up there, I don't know. We all know how he got off because he fell flipping right off it and just about broke his neck. But that was the night of the ostrich, I believe, Ken. With the ostrich barbecue that evening.
They bought the ostrich at Smithfield. It was the first ever ostrich slaughtered in the UK. And they had it on display in the upper floor near the sheep section at Smithfield. And Gavin and John McElraith bought it. And then they put the thing in a black plastic bag and went through the security at Heathrow Airport. And the woman said to Gavin, "What's that you've got in that plastic bag?" He said, "An ostrich." And she said, "Don't be so bloody stupid." And he opened it up, and there was the big kind of Fred Flintstone style, looking him right in the eye. And she went, "Oh no!" But he was allowed to take it on, you know. And so that was up in the. They got into the plane, stored it up in the luggage rack, and away they went. And then he took it home and froze it, and we all had bits of that for years after it. I'm quite sure.
Bloody ostrich.
some man, and of course those that don't know of Big Evan Shanks, there should be a podcast written about him. Tossed the caber for Scotland, reckoned to one of the men responsible for bringing the first Beltex into the country. One of my father's sparring partners with Blue Domain sheep, and I've got a story about him in the Rank Village in the Royal Show, and me staying in the bed the one night, and I got nothing to sleep on, so the only pillow we'd got was a loaf of bread, so I ended up for bed, and then I went out to go and have a pee in the middle of the night, and the old bastard locking me out, and I was running about there with nothing at all on there, and I was running up and down that corridor, and a little bit worse for wear for a while, and eventually Shanksy took pity on me, but I think there were photographs somewhere which I hope will never come to life. What a man.
You wouldn't be the first person running about naked at the Rank Village, Andy, wouldn't you?
Well,
I think it was well named.
Yeah. We were doing in Smithfield always just to go away into London, didn't Piccadilly Circus and round about, and you'd always end up in Soho. It was always the same kind of group. There was a great establishment in Soho. We really did like it. It was called Raymond's Review Bar.
oh shit, no Raymond's Review Bar.
No, I've never been there.
Never.
There was one night we were really late to get to Raymond's Review Bar. Like it was after the start of the show, and we got there, and Raymond quite often would be at the door. And, right, boys, in you come. You'll need to be quiet. I'll get somebody to take you down. So that's where you guy with a torch, because the only seats were right in the front row, right at the bloody stage. Like I'm going. We're going to get fucking eaten here tonight if we stand here. Anyway, we're sitting there, and always had a half-time break for refreshments. So the show was absolutely superb. I mean, it was an eye-opener. The lights went up at half-time, and the bar was halfway up the stairs. You turned right, you went along, and the bar was there. So we were like, right, we're trying out a drink. We'll need to be up there quick. So as soon as the lights went up, we stood up and spun round, and the place was just fucking rammed with farmers. You could see guys diving for cover, like trying to hide under their jackets. And it was hilarious. It was just the next day, I'm walking around Smithfield, and it was just the no and nod, you know.
The first time I went down to Smithfield was 1977. And Big Nearly Poof said, "Right, we need to go up to Soho. We're going to Raymond's Review Bar." So we paid a fucking 20 quid. It was quite a lot of money at that time.
20 quid back then. Holy shit.
Aye. But you couldn't see what was happening up on the stage for bunnets and crooks. Yeah. Couldn't you believe it? You maybe heard mention of the guy called Andrew Morrow. When you asked him what the epitome of a good Highland cow was, he says, "A mouth like a shovel and a tongue like a scythe." That was his. And after that, you didn't need to worry too much. But he once turned up at a Smithfield show, and he had a cut above his eye, and his nose was all black and blue, and he had a kind of big scar down his chin. So I said, "What happened to you, Andrew?" He says, he said, "I got off the train and I took a misstep and I fell onto the platform." I said, "Oh, right. Well, so where did the stitches come from?" "Oh, they took me to the hospital." He said, "But they had to wait 12 hours before they put a stitch in me, because when they asked me how much I'd had to drink, he said, 'No very much, just one, maybe two.' And they said, 'What, whiskies?' He said, 'Aye, bottles.'" Hands up if you think the sheep trade has gone completely fucking bonkers.
Fletch, you're right, though. It's become very elitist at the top end of the terminal sire job.
Absolutely. You know, come on. Get a grip.
Crazy.
And again, it's driven by money that is the...
It's not farming money.
It's
No.
in one hand it's pallets, and in the other hand it's windmills.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yep.
But do you know what? It was ever thus.
Probably the same.
Look, I know it's
Money comes in and money goes out.
Nothing's changing, that's for sure. Well, maybe.
But it's going around the same folk, though, and that hasn't changed for years either. That's been the same all the way.
still the same folk. It's
There's
getting it done.
there's not very many new people in now. You know, it used to be
Yeah.
you get the odd industrial guy coming in. Like,
Right, because we're at a Christmas party, we need some party games. The Best Breed Society CEO Top 10.
Jonathan Barber. But no, because he's been around that. I mean, he's like, I tell you what, CEOs are like football managers. They're only there because they produce the goods for long enough before the society or the membership overwhelm them with it in the end. And they've got a set window of opportunity where they can actually produce the goods, and after that, they've got to go.
Scott, that's a good answer, but it's the wrong answer. But okay, number one, Jonathan Barber. We'll take that next. Number two, anybody else?
David Benson.
well, I think David Benson's pedigree started when he was a stockman.
Indeed.
And he knew everybody in the breed. But that's not enough. You need to be clever enough to know how to
future-proof the breed.
How to maneuver things that you need to maneuver, and that's a very important thing.
Sure.
There's far too many societies have had chief executives who knew nothing about the breed they were involved in, and so maybe there's a lesson there to be learned in the current straits that some of them find.
Good.
From my point of view, one of the best guys ever was the late Ben Coots, because Ben Coots had a depth of knowledge that would choke an elephant, but he knew how to manipulate people as well. He was involved in the Highland cattle breed for a long time, and I have been at a Highland cattle AGM, which can be one of the most inflammatory things in the world. And Ben Coots shot them down like a sniper every time they got up and said something. It was fantastic to watch. And that's what we need. We need people who know about what they're involved with. You don't actually need a proper businessman who knows nothing about the breed. What you need is somebody who knows about the breed and who's a businessman as well. That's my opinion.
Okay, good. I'm going to say number 4. I was highly impressed with Ron McHattie. I had a lot of dealings with Ron. Was not within the farming industry, not within the pedigree breeding industry, but he was a businessman and a people man, and he made sure that the people he had around his close committee, were themselves businessmen that knew not only how to breed animals, but knew how to run a business and make sure that the figures stacked up. Okay, that's 4. Right. Number 5.
Stephen McLean, CEO of the Texel Sheep Society. Steve knew the job, as Ken has just mentioned previously, from the grassroots level up, and because of that, he was very influential in driving the breed forward. It's very difficult when you're a breed CEO to please everybody, because you can't. You're almost like a football referee. You're not a CEO, but he could actually take the majority of people with him, which I think is actually the most achievable outcome. Steve was pretty good. I think he also checked out when he knew the time was right.
Number 6 for me would be Frank Milnes. Frank Milnes kind of oversaw the progression of the Beef Shorthorn Society from being an endangered species to being a sought-after breed. That was a spectacular rise. And I don't think it was as much to do with Frank being a clever stockman or anything like that, but I think he guided them through a few paths that they needed to go, and they didn't know they wanted to go it. Actually, you don't need a good breed secretary. You just need good cattle to start with, and then you don't need a fucking breed secretary. That's the end of it. You know.
If it's only that easy, Fletch. Good one. I agree with that.
Well, number 7, CEOs, it's pretty difficult because, I mean, every breed hasn't got a CEO, but it's probably Aileen McFadgen with the Blackies. She's done a tremendous job over the last God knows how long of putting up with all the breeders, like, honest to God. She deserves a medal for the shit she puts up with for them. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Amen to that.
And-
Absolutely.
The only thing I can add to that is she's also put up with George.
I mean, she should be a dame by now, to be honest, Fletch.
Did George not pave the way for her putting up with shit for the Blackies, or was it the other way around?
Who knows?
George couldn't pave his own back step. Christ almighty.
Number 8 now. It's David going to the Scimitar Society. What a great man he was. Fletch, we enjoyed his company. He did a great job with the breed. Number 9, Helen Ashton. Helen had a tremendous long run, of course, with the Beltex Society when they, of course, were in their infancy. And now we finally get to number 10.
I can tell you one of the best ones that I've slept with is called Fiona Slow.
Well, that'll be... And me too, to be fair.
High five, Andy. High five.
Hey, and see if the other two say the same thing. I'm fucking out of here.
Right, that has to be a wrap. It's getting late.
Okay.
Happy Christmas, fellas.
Thank you,
Yeah,
I
it's been good.
won't, and I promise I won't incriminate you all. But some of you might be in this shit. Some of you might be. But hey, happy Christmas. Now, get the out of here. I'm turning the lights off. Finally, I'd just like to wish a Merry Christmas to all of our listeners to Toplines and Tales, and thank you so much for bringing us up to 40,000 downloads within a year. You've been brilliant.